Welcome everyone to the Cornelia Stephanie Show. I'm here today with my co-host Dennis Gaither, and we're going to be talking about how to be gentle with yourself and to be gentle with thyself when life throws you a curveball. We're gonna talk to Dennis, and we're gonna find out how we practice those spiritual principles that Dennis is here every month teaching us how to do and how to be in that. So let me remind everybody what Dennis's practice has been. For Dennis, the process of healing is a sacred endeavor, a meeting place of shared purpose and intention. His work draws upon decades of spiritual practice and universal principles of mindfulness and nonviolence. So today we're going to talk about what do we do when life throws us a curveball? How do we respond to the events that happen? How do we treat ourselves? And how do we treat the people that are in that shared experience with us? And Dennis has quite the story to share with us. Welcome to the show, Dennis.
Thank you, Cornelia. It's always a pleasure to be here with you again. So
Yes.
happy for this opportunity to share something. They say sometimes that we need to teach what we need to learn.
Yeah, they do say that.
So learning to be more gentle with myself has always been a challenge. And in that title, the secret is to be going gentle with the self, the larger self. It's this particular time is a little bit of a different slant than what we've done before. It's not so much along a topic as along a story, but bringing things into the story.
Mm.
And I love it the way Spirit sometimes has a sense of humor. Because I was sort of, for whatever reason, I seem to be kind of having a little writer's block or presenter's block about what am I going to talk about this time?
Yeah.
And I was sort of having this thing going on here and asking for some help, some guidance with that. And then I come out of work one evening very recently, just a few days ago, and there is the door to my car smashed in. And somewhere along the way, there was a realization, oh, I can just talk about that. So what I want to do is actually share about that experience, but more not about just the story, but actually the process that I used to work with it. And it's kind of like a plate of hors d'oeuvres. Some people may find useful and some people may not. So I'm not going to claim anything other than this is something that was really useful for me.
Well, might I say that you create these show notes and you create the topic of what we're going to talk about, and it was interesting. I'm not going to share my observations yet until later on in the show because I really just want you to share what you're going to share. But I find this timing of it, the synchronicity of it, and everything that you're sharing timely as usual because you always bring, just like when you brought us the wheel of projection. These are always events that are timely that we can use in our own evolution.
Absolutely.
So I really I'm grateful that you brought this topic today, and I look forward to hearing this story unfold. So take us there. You were at work. You worked all day. It was a full day of work. You come outside, and do tell us what kind of car you're driving.
Okay, well, it's a Prius, 2015 Prius. It was parked outside the place where I work. And so basically, I come walking out, and there are many things on my mind, and I see that the car door has been smashed in to a point where the door cannot be opened. And so I had the kind of reactions that probably most of us would have initially. I was sort of shocked and kind of upset, and a little bit, mostly I was really like, how am I going to deal with this? I got all these things to do, these kind of things that were spinning, not too atypical. So what this is though, I'm going to kind of give you a little background though. What this is it's like it's an exiled part of myself that gets activated. The little
Okay.
part that feels unsafe, that feels like the world is a dangerous place.
Okay.
It's not the wholeness of who I am, but it's a part.
Okay.
And just the way we are as human beings here, that the truth of who we are, the deepest part is not, it's not really a part, it's just actually our wholeness. And that it is safe, and it has a sense of safety because that's its truth. It's able to relate with a sense of compassion and kindness to inner parts of ourselves in the outside world. And that's really the who we really are. But
Hmm.
as we arrive here in this world where we imagine that we are separate from our source and from each other, that fragmentation is within us as well. We've got lots of different little aspects. And some of those carry old experiences that are kind of hidden away. So we call those exiles. And so this is one of my exiles that gets bumped up here.
Mm.
That was the first reaction. But then along come some other places inside. There's some aspects of all of us that we have that can kind of manage things here, that kind of get things done for us, essential to our functioning. And it's sort of like I could experience them coming in and let's make some phone calls. Let's call the insurance company. Let's call the police to get a police report. And the exile starts to calm down, starts
Yeah.
to calm
One
down.
one question that I have: did you feel like attacked? Did you feel like it was an attack, like a personal?
Oh, well, yeah. That was an initial. That was an initial. There were all kinds of kind of crazy thoughts there that went on for a little while. I mean, things like maybe somebody who didn't like me or were mad at me and smashed my car on purpose because there was no
Okay.
sign of a note or another driver or anything like that. So there were some kind of wild kind of thoughts there, but they had to do with the belief the world's not a safe place.
Okay, that's good that you were able to. Well, it's all a process of
It's a
discovery,
process. It's a
right?
process. So initially those things were just spinning without that much awareness, but as
Right.
calmness started to come in, i.e. a little bit of self, capital S, self-presence starts to come in, then there's a little bit more perspective. Wow, look at those thoughts.
Yeah.
This is not very likely, really. Uh, but anyway, what happened then was I called first I talked to somebody from the insurance company, and as it turns out, the person was very kind, very patient, is my maybe a little bit rattled kind of discussion of what had occurred. But but that person's kindness and calmness actually calmed me down.
Wow. So were you standing outside of your car?
Oh yeah, I was
Outside
standing
the
outside the car, my cell phone, doing all this. Yep,
Okay. Yep.
I'm doing all that. So this is kind of one of the things when we connect with that presence in ourselves, it helps other people as well. I finished that call and the policeman came by, and the policeman was also extraordinarily kind and helpful
Yeah.
and suggested a possibility that maybe from across the street somebody had just backed into the car,
Mm.
and that's pretty likely. And it was a place that sold hearing aids. And I thought maybe the person just didn't hear
Huh.
the sound of metal crunching. So that gave a little bit more pause. But then I started to practice then, and this has sort of been ongoing here, but I'm going to use a practice that is described beautifully by Tara Brach
Yeah.
in a book of hers called Radical Compassion, and also on some various things. And it's called RAIN, RAIN. So the first place of RAIN is just simply recognize that you're upset, recognize something. And then the next part of it is the allow, just allow it to be there, not try to fight it. So I'm starting to do this, and I'm starting to actually get a sense of intention of I'm going to use this particular event. I'm just going to use this, and I'm going to approach it with a sense of curiosity and watch myself, and just use this for healing, because there's healing, there's an opportunity for healing or something in everything. So there's just a recognizing and allowing at this point, and just really then being open to the kindness of strangers, and then starting to feel gratitude for the kindness of strangers. And then in there, then as I start to pay more attention, I'm noticing some of the beliefs that are coming up. Like, I need this, it's like I've been personally attacked because my car is attacked. Like I'm identified with this vehicle, that somehow it's me somehow. Totally a belief that has no basis in reality. But without bringing it into awareness, we respond as if it does.
Mhm.
Uh, and so there were different kinds of attachments, but different kinds of beliefs. So it's kind of like a little process of just forgive me for believing that I need this car. Forgive me for believing that my salvation, my safety lies here.
Mm.
So so basically just kind of taking some time breathing, and then at some point just eventually getting back into my car. Since I couldn't open the front door, I had to climb over things, and I realized if I get in an accident, I'm going to be trapped in this car. So a little fear there. So again, it's a little taking some breaths, just noticing that, breathing to it, allowing it, and letting it move through. I got home just fine. So, but then things continued. We get to continue with, uh, kind of the initial problem is sort of taken care of. The phone calls are made, and whatever arrangements that need to happen are getting taken care of here. And then I get to get a little bit of compassion from people that I'm talking to at home, and some
Mm.
friends on the phone. I had a phone meeting that night, and and again, the the investigate part of rain is about just really noticing what's going on in your body, particularly. It's being curious, but it's especially paying attention to what's arising physically, the tightness in the jaws, the little clenching here, the little constrictions, and then noticing how it softens with just a little gentle awareness. There's a little aside that I would say here that the way we're wired neurologically, the limbic system, the amygdala, the emotional responsive part of the brain, it's actually most directly connected with our body. Uh, and that's the most direct communication. This higher cortex part that separates us from animals and things. It's a little bit. It's more. Its connection with our emotion is more through the body. It's almost like that part of us, the smartest part of us, in that sort of way. At least what we think of as the smartest part is kind of the last to know, in a certain way. And that really tuning into the nuances of our feelings, of our emotions, uh, is really best served by tuning into what's going on in the body. The little funny feeling in the stomach, the little constriction in the heart, but then noticing immediately as it starts to soften.
Mm.
So that was the process when I come home, and
So that
just
was day one.
tracking.
That was day one.
This is still
This
almost
is
hour one here.
hour one.
This
Okay.
is still hour one. It's evening at this point. As things soften and start to open, then it's like I'm starting to feel a sense of gratitude, gratefulness. And with gratitude, and we talked about that, I think it was the last time we talked about the gratitude, that from David Steindl Ross, that there's actually always an opportunity in everything, even the event that I might not necessarily be grateful because my car got smashed in, but I could tune into the kindness of strangers
Mm.
and knowing that I'm going to be all right. And then then something just really, really softened. I just completely relaxed. And and then I really felt I could feel myself a sense of connection with the unknown person on the other end of the phone, and the wonderful police officer who was very conscientious, and obviously cared a lot about whatever had occurred. More about him in a little while. Uh, but but what I find is that sense of gratefulness, it is, and of course there's many things written about how gratitude practice helps many things, and it's more on a scientific level. On a little bit more subtle level, it is both very nourishing, but it's also a bridge. It opens the passageway to something deeper. It kind of removes some blocks to get something else that might be a deeper experience. And as a part of that, another one of my practices is the workbook lessons of A Course in Miracles. 365 lessons. I started doing them 25 years ago, and I've been doing them ever since. Each one has an idea for the day, and there's a practice around it, which is designed to start with a practice and take you into a deeper experience. The lesson for that day was one called I Rest in God.
Ah.
And so I just came back to the lesson. And it's not just a matter of simply repeating words. It's not like some kind of an aphorism or things like that. But it's more about you start with the words, but then you sink into the experience of it. So there was a sense of deep sense of restfulness, a sense of I'm safe, I'm okay. But there was also an aware that in all of this, I want to say a little bit about there's a presence inside of it's like all these little activated parts and managers. They're all doing something here, but there's also something that can stand outside of all of that. And the psychologists can call it a witnessing self. I call it just self because it's more than just that, just a witness. Because that presence inside can actively engage with us. And it can extend kindness and compassion. It can be in a healing relationship with us and with each other. Self-presence of the police officer, self-presence of the insurance person, they actually had an influence with me, and my own self-presence was having an influence. And that's the go gently with thyself, capital S self, is learning to get in touch with that. I want to say a little bit more about it, about that self idea,
Yeah.
because it may sound a little abstract and esoteric. There's something that's not a part. It's a part of our wholeness, our oneness, and it's actually a shared self. I have my own experience of it, but you and I and everybody listening and not listening is sharing the same self, actually, at a very deep level. That can seem a little abstract and esoteric. And one of the work that I found that I really appreciate, work of Dr. Richard Schwartz, internal family systems work. He has a very concrete, I think, way of actually not so much trying to define that capital S self in some philosophical way, but how do you tell if you're actually aligned with it or not? And the way you tell if you're aligned with it or not is how you feel towards something, how you feel towards another person, how you feel towards something within yourself. He has a list of a number of C words like clarity and compassion, and but the ones that I find the most useful is if I can simply be even a little bit curious,
Mm-hmm.
or if I can relate to maybe this upset part of myself with some compassion. What it does is I've now no longer quite so identified with it.
Yeah.
I'm still in relationship to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I can almost kind of hold it kind of even, I can even reparent it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is moving more and more into the capital S self, the self.
Yeah. I have a question for you.
Cool.
So, how would this scenario played out for you 20 years ago?
Oh my goodness.
How would
Well,
you
at
talk
some
to
point
yourself?
previously in my life, I might have stayed just really blended with this part that sees this as a big catastrophe
Mm.
and got really angry. How dare somebody damage my car and then leave and not even leave a note or anything, and could basically see myself as a victim
Right.
and see this as at that point unknown person as my victimizer.
And then you
and
could
and the
develop
and the
a whole
ego,
product.
I'll continue with just where this could actually potentially go, because it
Yeah.
actually goes this way a lot with people.
Mm-hmm.
I could, having created that sense of what reality is, then that same part of me, what we call ego, the part that wants to be separate, now is going to seek some kind of vindication. And it kind of holds out the promise that if you get this vindication, whatever it is, uh, that then you'll feel better. And maybe you do get a little gratification for a little while, but it doesn't last, and the wound stays. So it could play out quite differently, and eventually the sense of the surface feelings might subside, but the wound stays there and it keeps acting, and it kind of comes out in different ways. All kinds of different ways. Can come out in a sense of worry, vigilance. Oh my God, I got to be really careful where I park my car now. could come out as just feeling really depressed, despondent. Oh my God, the world is a bad place, and I'm just a helpless little victim. There are many little stories in which that can continue to be spun.
Well,
Uh,
one of the things, one of the reasons why I wanted to let the audience know today, especially people that are listening in and tuning in for the first time, that are hearing you, is what an authentic human being you are, and how you're practicing the nonviolence in the experience. Because I mean, that's what you were doing, is you were responding to this event, observing, the parts that you describe, but also from a place, from a higher level of awareness that really practices nonviolence and do no harm. So no harm towards yourself, no harm to other people. And that's the part to recognize that this is where we are today, you are today, in your evolution, in your practice,
mhm.
right? Because like we said, maybe 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, this wouldn't have been this way. But it's through the work, the spiritual inner work, the principles that you teach and talk about, what you've learned in the Course of Miracles, what the work that you do with the people that you support, the work you do on yourself, resting in God. All of that is all the alignment that you're talking about.
Well, thank you. One of the keys, I'll just add something, that one of the keys there uh, is to uh, is to have an intention. I didn't, I kind of skipped over this, but early on in this process, I had an intention of how I'm going to experience this.
Oh, so you set that intention after you
As
saw.
early on, after the crash, after the damage was discovered, I decided that this is how I'm going to experience this. Now, by setting an intention, let me be clear, it doesn't mean, oh, I don't want to be upset about this, I'm going to not experience upset. That actually doesn't work very well. It's more about, I'm going to be curious. I'm just going to pay attention to my process with this and see how it all unfolds. As it turns out, I'll just give you a sneak preview. Actually, everything unfolded very well, but that's the little preview part of it here. Uh, and the other part that is really important is in our mindfulness, especially when we're following ourselves through something that might be upsetting or difficult, or maybe something where we really know we kind of screwed up, is actually to bring a sense of kindness, is actually to practice a sense of kindness with ourselves. That doesn't necessarily mean creating rationalizations and justifications. It just means uh, having a certain kind of internal gentleness, just having a certain gentleness with ourselves. There's a book I can suggest here, and it's called Good Morning, I Love You by Shauna Shapiro. I actually just read that book very recently. It's actually wonderful. Good
Oh,
Morning, I Love You, Shauna Shapiro. It's an easy read and wonderful. It's a self-help book or whatever you want, but it's wonderful.
it's beautiful. Sounds wonderful.
Yeah. So I want to continue a little bit further, because then as the evening kind of comes on, there's kind of now there's a space made and a little quietness and opportunity to do some deeper work with this, because there are some parts that are kind of still unhealed. There's a lot of things that have been settled and calmed down here, but there's really a deeper level that one can go to.
So we have about a minute before we go to break. Do you want to talk about this before we go to break or after we come
I'll
back?
tell you what, I'll tell you just a little bit before, and then we'll come back here.
Okay.
And I'm just going to allude to it a little bit, but a vehicle that I actually liked, I use this time and like to use often, is a meditation practice that comes from the Tibetan tradition called Tonglen. And it's been taught by many different teachers, but my personal favorite is Pema Chodron.
Mm.
She has a number of different books and products and other things. She's a wonderful teacher. But basically, the short story of it is rather than try to push away whatever it is that is unwanted, you actually breathe it in. You take a breath and you breathe it in.
Mm.
And on the out breath, you breathe out the healing. That's the basic nuts and bolts of that practice.
Mhm.
You can let me know. I have probably just a few seconds left, but what I'll just tell you is that on the in breath, what you're doing is you're allowing the experience to be there. And what I found in my personal experience of it, it's at the same time my body, my chest is expanding. It's almost like I am actually creating more space for it, for whatever it is, and then breathing out the healing. And then there's a process of extending that from in this case, from within myself, experiencing something to other people. That I think I want to spend a little bit more time talking about than in the few seconds that are remaining here. But okay, I'll say a little bit more. That as we kind of shift our own internal sense of something gone wrong or some suffering that we believe is there, as we shift it out of our own little focus and kind of universalize it, becomes part of the human experience. Our sense of aloneness with it goes away, and it becomes much softer. It's like, oh, you know, and so many times we use our suffering as the ego uses it as a way to create a sense of separation, of isolation, and so this kind of works against that.
Good.
So,
Good.
all right, you can do your break now.
Yes, we're going to take a break and we'll be right back with Dennis Gaither.
My name's Bob Skeel. I'm 91 years old, and I want to take a few minutes now to share with you the important role, actually the critical role, Kornelia has played in my life. I say critical because I'm not sure I'd be alive at all to the many possibilities that make up our human experience at my age, if not for her. I could have easily become another dead man walking, only half conscious, stumbling through my remaining years, if it hadn't been for Kornelia. 6 years ago, I lost my wife to Alzheimer's. We'd been married for 61 years. I never thought I'd be a widower, but there I was, suddenly lost and alone, but with the good sense to set a working goal for myself. I was going to spend the rest of my life committed to unconditional love, whatever that meant and wherever that took me. A year or so later, Kornelia came along, helping me over several years to focus that unconditional love where it had never been focused before, on me. My whole life, my entire being had been focused on love of neighbor, and I had derived great satisfaction from that. But in the process, I had ignored the second part. I love your neighbor as yourself. Now it was time to direct that love inward. I didn't see that right away, but Kornelia did, and she drew me there. She drew me actually to God. Through many conversations over coffee and after numerous, sometimes tearful, agonizing discussions, Kornelia was able to lead me, kicking and screaming, to within where I needed to be. It was there finally that I was able to re-identify myself. It was in bringing unconditional love to myself that I now saw myself in a new light, a fully conscious, worthy human being, capable of healing, loving, and creating in my own right all these gifts of the evolutionary process. I'm a new man now, younger as I get older. I don't move as fast as I once did, of course, but my smile is quicker and I engage the heart and mind of others more readily. I would likely not be at such a wonderful stage in my life if not for Kornelia. I owe my new life to her, a wonderful friend and a constant source of inspiration. Thank you, Kornelia.
We are back. Thank you for listening and tuning in. If you are watching us live on Facebook, if you want to call into the show and talk to Dennis at 1-800-930-2819, or if you're watching this on YouTube, we would love it if you would subscribe to the channel. Thank you for listening and tuning in. Dennis, you were telling us before we went to break about this next phase of
Next phase.
the next phase.
then we'll talk about, I'm happy to talk about the next phase. So I talked briefly a little bit about the Tonglen practice, very briefly, because there's a lot more to it that one could do. But I'll just kind of walk you through a little bit, because I include a forgiveness process with it. And it involves, there were actually basically two main themes that I worked with in my evening practice. And one of them was that part of me that felt that shock and that surprise and the sense that the world's a dangerous place when I first came out.
Yeah.
So I was able to just kind of re-evoke that, but actually then be present with it in a kind of way, and actually breathe it in. It's almost like a welcoming. It's a gentle welcoming for it to just come and just be inside me, because it's already there anyway, but it's in a more spacious place, and gently breathing out a healing for it. And the healing doesn't necessarily have to be terribly specific. It can be just a sense of safety or divine love or whatever. And then extending, the process of extending was then to anyone others that I knew who might have experienced. Actually, you just told me that you had a similar experience. So of others who may have had any kind of a situation where they suddenly had a surprise that was kind of shocking and upsetting to them, which is everybody. And as with each progressive breath, extending this all to basically to all humanity, so that it becomes much bigger and bigger. But there's a part of it of actually breathing in whatever the thing that's judged against, but there's also breathing out the healing, the healing light of forgiveness, of just love, of trust. And so the focus starts to shift more to the healing, and to really being connected with that younger part of myself here.
Yeah.
And even without necessarily that many clear memories, but there were some from my own personal history of times when there were reasons to think that it might not be very safe from the standpoint of a very small child. But there's a deeper layer when you kind of extend that to that almost everybody has some kind of an experience that has some variation on that. There's a stepping back to a deeper layer that they all stem from some sense of separation, some sense of separation from source, from whatever you want to refer to that as, the source, the divine God, from ourselves, from each other. And so the forgiveness is about, forgive me for believing that I'm separate. Forgive me for believing that I'm separate from source, that I'm unsafe. And forgive me for forgetting that I actually am one with all, that I actually am in my deepest truth safe. So there's the healing that happens there, but it's truly by coming not as an intellectual process, but by really connecting with that, going into that sense of shock and surprise and the crazy thoughts of maybe somebody did this on purpose, which was totally not true. But then it shifted, and I was really interested in doing some work with whoever that other driver was. At that point, I had no idea who it was. All I knew is they really messed my car up and they left. And I thought maybe it was someone who kind of fled in panic, and I had a lot of a sense of that now that maybe I really kind of, for some reason, was drawn to the sense of there might be some fear with that. And what it moved through as I just stayed with that, just breathed with it, was recalling my own times as a rebellious teenager, and remembering times of doing things that I knew I really shouldn't be doing. But despite the outward show of bravado, inwardly really being kind of scared I was going to get caught and be in big trouble. And so this is what came up in that process, was the rebellious teenager who was really kind of a scared teenager who felt kind of lonely and was really trying to be accepted by a group of peers who did a lot of the same kind of thing, which is so often the case. So I got an opportunity just to recall that. I hadn't thought about this part of me for so long, to be with this one, to be in a very kind and compassionate way. Forgive me for believing that I have to do these things in order to be loved and accepted. Forgive me for believing that I can't just be who I am. So there was a lot of healing with that little adolescent part of me.
Yeah, and it's the part in you that you adore and cherish so much, and that is the sacred part, right?
It is, well, it is bringing that sacred part into relationship. It's the key is to bringing the self, capital S self, into relationship with whatever has been pushed aside.
Yes.
That's the key. Because
Yeah.
the tendency is to keep pushing it aside. But then something interesting happened. Then I got a really clear message. It was very, very clear that whoever this other driver was, they actually didn't know that they had hit my car.
Huh.
It was very distinct. And I thought about it. Yeah, it was across the road from a hearing aid place. Maybe they didn't hear the metal or something. But I really kind of, I got that. And there was, any residual sense of angst about the other person, it was just gone.
Mm.
It was just gone as I healed this little something in me, basically. Oh my
Mhm.
God, how dare they do this and leave? Well, I did that in Lyft, not that exact thing, but as a kid. And aren't we all tempted to do that sometimes?
Yeah.
So there was such a sense of peace with all that. And I'm going to bring it down to the next morning, to the next day. So continue with the practice, more very wonderful, kind interactions with the car auto body shop. Everybody's really being very wonderful. But then the police officer calls me. And this police officer had actually gone to the trouble to check several businesses nearby that had security cameras and actually was able to do that to find the car, find the license number, and to call the other driver. And he told me that the other driver actually didn't know that she had hit my car,
Mm.
that she was mortified when he showed her pictures of the damage. She had no idea. She drove a big pickup truck and it was kind of much bigger than my little car and it just crumpled the door and she drove off.
Mm.
And so a little bit later that day, the police officer gave me her phone number. So I called her and she was very apologetic and she said, I actually didn't know. And I says, yeah, I know you didn't know. I know you didn't hear it. I totally believe you. I think she was a little surprised that I totally believed her. Uh, but actually then I told her I'd done this practice the night before and I'd gotten a premonition that you didn't. There was a long pause. I don't know how that landed, but she
Yeah.
was hugely relieved that I genuinely was not angry with her. And I really wasn't.
Yeah. And what a different experience.
Yes. And so she was very happy to give her insurance information. The whole thing is getting very taken care of, basically. And so it's very cool. But I remembered also with regard to her that morning, starting with an intention, there's no guilt. We start a forgiveness process with there's no guilt. And there's an intention. I really don't want the other person to feel guilty. Now, the truth of the matter is I may not have much control over what guilt another person holds on to. I can't
Yeah.
completely control that. But it's really about doing that for my benefit as part of my own release. But it can influence that because
Yeah.
I could have had a different reaction and fed her already feeling bad about herself.
Yeah.
And I wasn't trying to make nice. That was just how I genuinely felt at that point.
Yeah. And you had chosen that you were going to
Yeah.
extend that love, that you were going to extend
Yeah.
that.
And so it was just kind of like, okay. So, I mean, so this is basically, I've just shared, this is kind of a process in which I went through here. I used a number of different practices and things from a number of different places. But really much of it had to do with self-compassion, of really connecting with self. And so then I feel really grateful for kind of the kindness of strangers and the many very kind teachers and helpers that I've had along the way. Some of them I've met, some of them, the forgiveness processes from Sandy Levy Lundeen and Diederik Walsack and things people I've never met in person, but have introduced me to practices like Pema Chodron. So I'm just really quite filled with gratitude and grateful for this opportunity to share a little of it as well. So thank you, Cornelia.
Wow, that's wonderful. So let's take our last break, Dennis. And when we come back, you're going to take the audience and me through a little meditation practice.
Cool. All right.
Okay, Zach, we're ready to go to break.
Thank you.
Do you know deep in your gut that if you could just be seen and get your message out, that you'd easily reach your tribe? How wonderful would it be if a fairy godmother came along, waved her magic wand, and suddenly you were more than visible, you were dazzling. Would you sign up for that? Hi, I'm Deborah Lupien, spiritual teacher and international best-selling author of Akasha Unleashed, the Missing Manual to You. I'm here with the wonderful news that such a person actually exists. Her name is Kornelia Stephanie, and she's gifted at helping entrepreneurs become dazzling. I've watched her work her magic over and over to turn invisible entrepreneurs into dazzling stars who easily attract their ideal clients and have fun doing it. Not long ago, I was the recipient of her gift. As a guest on her show, Living Heaven on Earth, not only did we have fun, but Kornelia helped me get my message out to a wider audience, which resulted in a very nice spike of traffic to my website and more subscribers to my list. Did I mention it was incredibly easy? Kornelia's running a veritable media empire of uplifting programs. They cover a broad range of topics and have a large appreciative audience. That's a winning combination, folks. Guess what? Those shows need guests and hosts. Imagine, after guesting on a few shows, moving up to hosting your own popular show. That is absolutely possible for you. So now you have a decision to make. Are you going to keep struggling on your own? Or are you going to sign up for some Kornelia Stephanie dazzling visibility magic? Email radio@korneliastephanie.com today.
Thank you, everybody, for listening and tuning in. I'm with Dennis Gaither. We're talking about what happens when life throws you a curveball. How do we respond? How do we respond? And do we respond with frustration, anger, anxiety, or do we respond with gentleness and curiosity? That's what we're talking about, Dennis.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Cornelia. During the break, Cornelia, you shared that you had had a similar experience as well. So that was quite a parallel process there.
Very much so.
So very cool. And kind of a similar outcome of things feeling there's some healing that comes from it, receiving compassion from others.
That
So
was,
there's a practice.
you hadn't mentioned that yet. That was one of the things you wanted to mention too, is the compassion that you received from others. You had quite a few people reach out to you and
Oh, absolutely, I did.
yeah.
Yes, I do. So, that it's not. Yes, it's an inner job, but we actually can really help each other out in many ways by how we are with each other. So, and I received a lot of lovely blessings from people around me, for sure.
Showing you how much they love you and they care about you. It's wonderful to feel and be a part of community.
Cool. So I want to just walk you through a meditation practice here, and it's a little variation of Tonglen. For a really in-depth teaching about it, I would just refer you to Pema Chodron, who was a wonderful teacher. But for those who would like to just kind of go through a brief meditation, and I include a little forgiveness process as a part of it here. So if you're intrigued, curious, that's an aspect of self, kind of curious, welcome to join in. So we start this practice by just sitting or lying in a comfortable way. I prefer sitting, either eyes closed or just gazing downward at an angle, so there's not really a lot of things going on in the visual field. And just noticing the breath. And just settling in and being aware of whatever's going on in the body. And just noticing it, allowing it, letting it move through. Becoming more and more aware of the breath. Nice, easy, slow breaths. And it may be useful just to feel yourself in connection with the earth, with something that's grounding, that feels like a solid base, whatever that might be for you. It might be actually just a sense of interconnection with the earth. And I'll move through maybe a little faster than we would normally do this, but take your time with this part. But if you want, you can invite in a very gentle way something that may have created some disturbance for you, either within yourself or maybe apparently in somebody else. I'm going to suggest not choosing something that you would regard as particularly traumatic for this practice right now, at least by yourself, but something that might be a mild disturbance, just to try it out. And just allow that to arise in your awareness in a gentle, organic kind of way. And let it be okay if nothing does. That's fine too. And if there's some self-judgment about maybe there should be something, well, you can work with that. Whatever comes into your awareness, particularly anything that might be a self-judgment, just allow it to just come in. See if you can have a sense of curiosity about it. And with each breath, just invite it in a little bit more. Just breathe it in. Feel the space inside, the spaciousness inside. And as you breathe out a healing for it. And it's really not necessary to be very specific about the healing. It could just simply be an intention of healing, or it could be just a sense of kindness or forgiveness. So I'm going to be still for a few moments and just allow you to do that. Just breathing in the unwanted, the thing that's been judged against, and breathing out the healing. And in particular, as you do that, really pay attention to the felt sense of it, how that feels in your body, in your heart, in your gut. Just noticing. And noticing if anything shifts as you do this. And just allowing whatever happens. And begin to just gradually extend your awareness out a little bit to include maybe another person or maybe some other people that might either now currently or have experienced the same kind of disturbance, even if it's for some other different reason, but others that may have experienced the same thing as yourself. Again, breathing in the unwanted, breathing out the healing. And with each breath, just keep extending that circle of inclusion wider and wider, even out to people you don't even know, even out ultimately to everyone. And gradually shift the attention to the healing, the sense of a healing extending out. So we're kind of shifting the focus a little bit from the unwanted to the healing here, just in a very gradual way. But we're not excluding anything. And then see if there's some little thought, some little belief that you might be holding that might be kind of driving this disturbance in some way, a belief about yourself, perhaps about safety or about belonging or about being enough or being too much. See if there's some belief that you may be holding about yourself and may have held for much of your life even.
Dennis, we have 2 minutes.
Okay, we're getting there. And in the next 2 minutes, in the next 2 minutes, see if you can forgive yourself for the belief. Forgive me for believing, and just kind of name what the belief is. And just like you're just offering it up into the healing universe, whatever you want to use. And see what you want to take in its place, something that you may have forgotten that's true about yourself, like forgive me for forgetting that I am whole. I've never left God. I've never left myself. And then notice, even in this very short practice, how do you feel inside? Has anything shifted? And open your heart in gratitude for whatever the experience has been, for yourself, for allowing the experience to happen. And I think we're getting under the 2 minutes here. I'm going to suggest doing this practice that it's one best done in a lot more time than what we had here, but maybe you get the idea.
It's a great idea. It's a great idea. Thank you so much, Dennis, for bringing us this wonderful experience of gentleness and compassion, and what you did when this happened to you with your car, and for the wonderful meditation always, for the sacredness that you so beautifully delivered to us. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for listening and tuning in, and we'll see you again next time.
All right.
Hi,
Thank you,
my
Cornelia.
name is
Thank you,
Danica
Zach, for
Cox, and I
managing
want to
the
tell you a little
IT
story about a story and how my friend Cornelia Stephanie helped me through to the other end of that story. I have gone from the dark of a story I was telling myself that wasn't true to the light of optimism to see my way out of where I was and to where I want to go. And it all started with her scheduling a session for me to help me reclaim my money or my financial empowerment. Up until that point, I had been telling the story that my business was dying, that my business was not successful anymore. And the more I tried to figure out what was going on, the worse I felt about it. And when I had to get ready to do the session with Cornelia, she asked me to go look at the numbers and where I was through the year to date, and then also to come prepared with a number that I wanted to raise my income to. Well, I was quite comfortable with that part, right? I knew where I wanted to be. What I wasn't comfortable with doing is going and looking up those numbers. But I made myself do it, even though I tried to backpedal my way out of the session. She didn't know that, but I was going to try to get myself out of the session. And I looked up those numbers, and it was incredible that I discovered through that process that my business wasn't dying. In fact, I was doing 12% better than I had the year before. So I was shocked. I was shocked literally at the power of the story that I had been telling for months. But more than that, I was shocked that I had allowed myself to get there. And later in that day when I had my session with Cornelia, she pointed out some very obvious things, like, how are you going to get where you want to go if you don't know where you want to go? How are you going to get there if you don't have the goals written out, if you don't have it set up so that you know where you are and where you're going to go? Totally makes sense, right? I had been in business, somebody else's business, as a sales manager for years, and I was a national sales manager. I had awards for sales management. I had business awards because of numbers. And yet when it came to doing my own business, I totally forgot all that I'd ever learned. So by the time Cornelia, working with me in just one session, got me to look deeper at the numbers and where did I want to go, and actually, claiming where I wanted to go, I was filled with a sense of optimism and hope like you can't believe. It was like everything shifted for me. And I am so looking forward to our continued sessions to see how far I can really push myself to get where I've only dreamed of being, where I've never taken the dream and actually brought it into concrete existence. So thank you, Cornelia, for the work that you're doing out there. I appreciate it, and I can't wait to see where I go from here.